Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Le groupe.
The G7 countries are all facing tariffs and global instability. But Japan is not in a recession. The United States aren't in a recession. The UK isn't in a recession. France, Italy, Germany, they're not in recession. Why is Canada, under this Liberal Prime Minister, the only G7 country in a recession? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, we are currently managing a tariff war with an economy that is much more integrated with the American economy, and the colleague across the way knows it very well. One thing is clear. In the meantime, we are creating jobs. We have been able to attract jobs in many different sectors in our economy. I'll give you a couple of examples. Whether it be 3,000 jobs with the agreement with Saab and Bombardier for building a new airplane, whether that be in Trois-Rivières, Kruger, 350 new jobs, or whether that be in Prince Edward Island, 250 new jobs.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Mexico shares a border with the United States in a tariff war, and Mexico is not in a recession either. It's just Canada in North America that's in recession. And beyond that, mortgage defaults have gone up by a third year over year. We have the highest level in 17 years. Canadian households are the most indebted in the G7. Today, Food Banks Canada showed that Canada is failing once again in a new report. 1/4 of Canadians are facing food insecurity. Why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession? The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague has said, we are facing unjustified tariffs in the context of our free trade agreement with the United States. This week, we will be discussing that agreement with American representatives, but at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we're not waiting. We're protecting Canadian workers. We're protecting Canadian industries. We're working with the provinces to make sure that we can help these industries in a positive way, and at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we're building Canada.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Group of 7 industrialized nations, they all face tariffs and global economic forces, but Japan is not in recession. The United States is not in recession. The United Kingdom is not in recession. France is not in recession. Germany is not in recession. Italy is not in recession. The only G7 country in recession is Canada. Why is it that Canada, under this Liberal Prime Minister, is the only G7 country in a recession today?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should do his economic homework. He should understand that Canada is the most integrated country in the world with the United States. They have declared a trade war on us. This side of the House understands that. We will control what we can control. That's why we're building new mines at Red Chris. That's why we're building new pipelines on Sunrise. That's why we're building 4 new mines in Saskatchewan, a uranium mine, a potash mine, and a copper mine. They should start to understand economics and try to help build this country instead of tear it down.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mexico shares a border with the United States and is as integrated with the U.S. as we are. And Mexico is not in a recession. Only Canada, in all of North America, only Canada is in recession. Not only that, since this Liberal Prime Minister took office, he's lost 46,000 jobs, 112,000 in the last 3 months alone. We have the second highest unemployment in the G7, a third higher than the U.S. The economy has contracted 3 of the last 4 quarters. Over $20 billion of net investment has fled the country. 5 consecutive quarters of investment dropping. Mortgage delinquencies up a third, a 17-year high. Why are we the only country in a recession?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition should take note of some of the facts. For example, 3,500 jobs annually being created with our Joint Support Ships contract, 2,300 jobs to produce our AOPS ships, 1,800 jobs for our fixed-wing search and rescue, 700 jobs for our remotely piloted aircraft system, 5,300 direct jobs for our River-class destroyers, Mr. Speaker. The list is very long. The Leader of the Opposition should stop running down Canada and join us in our efforts.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's the Liberal Prime Minister that's running down our economy and then running away from accountability for it. Where is he anyway? We've known now it's been 4 days since Statistics Canada reported that Canada is the only G7 country in a recession, and the Prime Minister has not answered one question, not in this House, not from the media, not from anyone. The guy who said you hire him in a crisis, well, now he's made a crisis. He's created the only G7 economy that's in a recession. Instead of running away from accountability, why doesn't he run in here and do his job?
That I think broke a rule. I mean, we're implying that somebody is not in the House when they could be. I would warn members against doing that, because at some point I might have to dock questions. The Minister of Jobs and Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In fact, when the global winds of uncertainty were blowing, what did this government do? We took immediate action to put things into place to protect workers. In fact, if their jobs were threatened, if their economies were threatened, if their sector was threatened, and Mr. Speaker, every time we take action for workers to protect workers, these guys vote against it. Just recently, Mr. Speaker, $6 billion to skilled trades workers, including apprentices in the pipeline right now to help make sure that they can complete their training and get those fantastic paying jobs. These guys are ignoring.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, with Canada being the only G7 country in a recession, there are very real human costs. Today they came to light as Food Banks Canada published a report giving this government a failing grade, indicating that 1/4 of all Canadians now live in food security. 1/4 of food banks have actually run out of food in the last year. Mr. Speaker, what is a single mother who can't afford groceries supposed to do when she gets to an empty food bank? How is she supposed to feed her kids?
Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Yet again, I think the Leader of the Opposition should read the entire report, because although, of course, people are struggling, in fact, what the National Food Banks said was that they're seeing some reasons for optimism, because the very things that they've called for, like automatic tax filing, like the introduction of the Groceries and Essentials benefit, like expanded dental care and investments in childcare, they note as positive and bringing down the cost of living for Canadians. And Mr. Speaker, I will point out they voted against all those measures.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, we know the Liberals are backtracking on environmental issues left and right. The member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie even resigned. But despite these setbacks, the Liberals keep saying that they're going to meet their greenhouse gas reduction targets. So we're wondering how. So last Thursday, the Bloc Québécois demanded the numbers the Liberals are relying on to claim that emissions will go down despite all the measures that they have sacrificed. The minister didn't have those numbers. Today, the numbers on those setbacks. Does the minister have the numbers? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. The Bloc likes to talk about setbacks, but maybe we could talk about what we've done to move forward. Well, we have methane regulations. We've strengthened them. That's 400 megatons of emissions that we are reducing. If we want to talk about what we're doing when it comes to electricity, and that's also something that Hydro-Québec has been calling for, that we can move forward with having a stronger, more resilient electricity network. We're doing the work and we're reducing our emissions at the same time. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, well, the minister clearly still doesn't have those numbers. We want numbers for this year because it's this year that the Liberals announced a new pipeline, new LNG projects, that they've cut the industrial carbon price in Alberta. They've abandoned the emissions cap for the oil and gas sector. They've suspended the clean electricity regulations. They've scrapped the carbon tax, and the list goes on. Today, without numbers to measure the impact of those setbacks, how are they going to meet their targets? They say they're going to. How are we supposed to swallow that? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Well, if we want to talk about lists, because apparently they like lists, well, I talked about strengthening the methane regulations. I talked about work with the electricity network. I could also talk about what we're doing at the international level. We're a leader when it comes to investing in international climate funds. If the member wants to talk about something else, we could also talk about what we're doing for electric cars here in Canada. We're doing a lot of great work with investments in green technology, and we continue to fight climate change, and we will continue to do that. The Honourable Member for Gaspésie-les-Îles-de-la-Madeleine, Listegouche. Mr. Speaker, all these setbacks don't even include those when it comes to environmental assessments, the protection of endangered species, and the list goes on. The Climate Institute of Canada says the government won't meet its climate targets. The Pembina Institute says the same thing. The former Environment Minister, who has since resigned, says the same thing. And all we're asking the government to do is to provide the proof. They say they're going to meet their targets despite these setbacks. Where's the proof? Well, they're unable to give us any, so how can we not conclude that Liberals aren't telling the truth? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Bloc Québécois wants to talk about numbers. Let's talk about numbers. 30% of our land and sea territory will be protected by 2030. That's an investment in the nature strategy, $3.4 billion. There's a green energy tax credit that's going to benefit Quebec, up to $80 billion to electrify or to improve our network, to help Hydro-Quebec, to build the future with Hydro-Quebec. We want to talk about numbers. Improved methane regulations that are going to drop regulations by 2030 by 75%. That is climate action from this government.
Honourable Member for Calgary East.
This grand illusionist Liberal Prime Minister is the only leader in the entire G7 that drove their economy into a recession. Liberals and their paid media want Canadians to believe this full-blown Liberal recession is just a technical one. But there's nothing technical about the single mom that's putting back groceries that just lost her job. In fact, this Prime Minister lost 112,000 jobs in the first 3 months of this year and gave Canada the second worst unemployment in the entire G7. If this truly is about global problems, why is Canada the only country in the entire G7 in a recession?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, although they seem to want to celebrate it, we are in a trade war. We do face some headwinds. But let's look at some economic facts. We have the second fastest growing economy in the G7. Non-U.S. exports are on track to double over the next decade. Foreign direct investment at twice the rate of our nearest G7 peer, and we now rank as the most attractive country in the world for infrastructure investment. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we're focused on building a strong economy for Canadians. They're full of bluster, rhetoric, and press conferences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary East.
Mr. Speaker, after 11 years of this incompetent Liberal government, there's nothing left to celebrate. The single mom who lost her job has nothing to celebrate. The 2.2 million Canadians going to a food bank have nothing to celebrate. 5 straight quarters business investment has declined. 3 out of the last 4 quarters, the economy has shrunk. $20 billion of investment has fled to the U.S. because of this incompetent Prime Minister since he took power. Instead of trying to make America great again, why doesn't he tell us why Canada is the only G7 country in a recession today?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, last elections, Canadians had a choice. They elected a Prime Minister with world-class economic and business credentials. We are going to build the strongest, most resilient economy in the G7. At home, we're investing. We're investing in infrastructure, defense, housing. We're cutting taxes. We're going to build a strong, resilient economy. On that side of the House, Mr. Speaker, it is nothing but empty parking lot press conferences, props, bluster, and rhetoric. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Long Range Mountains.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only country in the G7 in a recession. In Newfoundland and Labrador, parents are watching their children pack their bags to leave the province because this Liberal government is driving up the cost of living, killing opportunities and local jobs. This is a full-blown Liberal recession. Statistics Canada has confirmed that in my province, 1 in 10 workers are unemployed. Nationally, insolvencies are at their highest level since 2009, and household debt is the worst in the G7. If Canada's recession was just about global energy and tariffs, why is it that no other G7 countries are in a recession?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, while my colleague once across the aisle once again gets up and reads the same notes, I want to remind her that in our province of Newfoundland and Labrador, announcements made by this government are resonating. Almost $1 billion for small craft harbors. Not only does this support the fishing sector, it also creates jobs. An announcement last week, Ghost Gear, retrieval, $15 million, $5 million a year. The call is out for communities in our province to also participate in this. These programs are building economies, getting people working, and they're growing Canada strong.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Long Range Mountains.
Mr. Speaker, the minister can quote all the empty, good news, Liberal promises that she wants, but the real data has already arrived in Newfoundland and Labrador, and the facts are already in, and they prove that we have the worst economy in the G7. While other nations grow, our economy is shrinking, and our young people are paying the price. With 1 in 10 workers unemployed at home, skyrocketing consumer insolvencies across the country, and increasing mortgage delinquencies, when will this Liberal Prime Minister stop quoting out-of-touch Liberal projections, face the facts of economic failure, and fix the mess that he's created?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Mr. Speaker, here we go again. The feigned indignation. It was an actual fact in our province of Newfoundland and Labrador. The apprenticeship program is investing in young people, Red Seal certifications, getting them to work on projects like Bay du Nord. Again, almost $1 billion in small craft harbors, getting people to work in rural communities. Instead of reading tired notes, I encourage this member to actually speak to people in our province and find out how important these jobs are.
The Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
For the last several months, these Liberals have repeatedly gaslit Canadians by repeating the PMO talking point, the fastest growing economy in the G7. But the reality is we have the only shrinking economy in the G7. This Liberal Prime Minister was touted as some kind of an economic genius, but all he's delivered is a shrinking economy and 112,000 Canadians who have lost their full-time jobs this year. If this is truly about global events, as they keep saying, why is Canada the only G7 country that's now in recession?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
We're learning in this House, we're learning that just because Conservatives say things over and over again with righteous indignation does not make it any more true. Canada's economy is facing the headwinds that every other economy around the world is facing. The Bank of Canada governor came to Public Accounts Committee today and cautioned the Conservatives at taking one indicator over another and prioritizing it too much. In reality, our economy is strong, which is projected to have the second fastest growth. Our non-U.S. exports are up. Foreign direct investment is at its highest point in almost 20 years, and wages have...
The Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
I can tell you this, Mr. Speaker, no Conservative will ever apologize for getting up and fighting against this bad Liberal government. Let's talk about some numbers that he says we're making up. From From Statistics Canada, 112,000 Canadians have lost their jobs this year. From Food Banks Canada, 25% of Canadians are now food insecure. Wow. These are not fake numbers. This member should know that. These are real people who are suffering as a result of this Liberal government. If it's all about external events, as they keep saying, why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession? How about a real answer?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, let me give that member a real answer. Canada's economy is strong and becoming more resilient under this government. And we will never apologize on this side of the House for being optimistic about the future that we're building in this country, together with all Canadians, with generational investments in housing, infrastructure, defense, innovation, and productivity. We're seeing the highest level of foreign direct investments in nearly 2 decades. That's good news. Canadians know it, and we'll continue building a stronger.
The Honourable Member for Cloverdale Langley City.
Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. People vote with their feet when they have no other way to vote, and investors vote with their dollars every single day. Right now, they are voting against Canada. More than 112,000 jobs have disappeared in just 3 months. Behind every one of those jobs is a Canadian wondering how to pay the rent, buy groceries, and keep the lights on. If the Liberals insist this is all because of global conditions, why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession? And when will the Prime Minister admit that his policies have driven investment and jobs elsewhere?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, last year, Canadian exports to non-U.S. markets grew by over 17%. Canada is expected to have the second fastest growing economy in the G7 this year and next. And the first 4 months of this year alone, we landed over $10 billion in commercial deals. Over the past year, Canada has secured more than 20 economic and defense agreements across 5 continents. Countries are choosing Canada, Mr. Speaker. We are ranked the world's most attractive place for investment, and we will build.
The Honourable Member for Joliette-Manawan. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals announced on Thursday that they were cutting the Canadian Consumer Protection Initiative. This is a fund that financed research on the cost of living, anti-competitive practices, and the list goes on. Between 2025 and 2027, we're talking about $7 million. That's penny pinching for a government that's handing out tens of billions of dollars to oil companies, but it reduces our agency's ability to do their work. When it comes to consumer protection, why is the minister defending big business instead of defending citizens? The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, we will present a new vision for competitiveness in this country. We obviously believe in the importance of civil society to protect consumers, and we are going to work with organizations to make sure that they have access to funding because their work is extremely important. At the same time, we're going to work with the provinces and territories because we know that when it comes to protecting consumers, that is largely provincial and territorial jurisdiction. We are going to find a solution, and I look forward to working with my colleague on that. The Honourable Member for Joliette-Manawan. Well, Mr. Speaker, the cut to the Consumer Protection Initiative is not going to have any impact on public finances. We're talking about peanuts here, but it's quite a windfall for big businesses that are cutting corners. The Liberals are preventing consumer protection agencies from investigating, for example, price gouging in grocery stores. They also can't investigate contracts in telecoms or in the banking sector, airline pricing practices. They're literally helping big business protect itself from consumers who are informed about their rights. How can the minister justify this? The Honourable Minister. Well, we want to make sure that consumers are well educated on their rights, and we know that we need to do more to increase competition in the grocery sector, in telecommunications, and when it comes to all big businesses, where we know that sometimes there are monopolies that can be problematic. And that is why we are going to take a clear, aggressive approach when it comes to competitiveness while protecting consumers. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only G7 country in recession. And yet, just a few days ago, the Prime Minister boasted that Canada had the second strongest economy in the G7. Well, he's misled Canadians. 112,300 jobs have been lost since the start of the year. Canada now has the second worst unemployment rate in the G7. Other countries are facing the same tariffs and the same international crises. Why is the Prime Minister the only G7 leader to have plunged his country into a liberal recession? The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade. Mr. Speaker, as my colleagues have explained already, our government is working hard not only to protect our industries and our workers who are facing unjustified tariffs from the United States. We're doing that, obviously, with our partners in the provinces and territories. But we have a mandate from Canadians that we got in the election last year to build a more resilient economy, to build major projects for the future, the economic future of Canada. And that is exactly what we are doing from coast to coast to coast. Canadians are proud of the Prime Minister's work. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. The Minister is right. They got a mandate, but they haven't met that mandate. We're in recession right now. The Prime Minister said that he was the only one who could fix the problems with Donald Trump, but he hasn't fixed anything a year and a half later. Meanwhile, 87,000 jobs were lost in Quebec during the first 4 months of 2026, and nearly half of them were in the construction and manufacturing sectors. The Conservatives are calling for an emergency debate because we want to know what their plan is. We don't want to hear just empty words. We hear the government's real plan to see what they're going to do to help Canadians. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, all parliamentarians can help the government and Canadians to support industry and workers, and we can come together to fight the tariffs imposed by the American government. We are always looking for positive contributions from parliamentarians here in the House of Commons, in the other place as well, Mr. Speaker, and we'll always be happy to work with the member across the way who asked that question and with all of his opposition colleagues, because we are there to support Canadians. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent, Ackyawenrek. Mr. Speaker, the reality, unfortunately, is very sad for Canadians. Canada is in recession. Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. Canada has the worst food inflation in the G7, and Canada has the second highest level of unemployment in the G7. That's the reality, and that's the result of this Liberal Prime Minister for Canada. He was supposed to be a magician who was going to fix the economy, but his tricks aren't working. Why is Canada? Why is this Liberal Prime Minister in recession? And why are other G7 countries not in recession? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think that Canadians know very well that Canada's economy is one of the most integrated with the American economy, and that we are facing headwinds and turbulence because of the unjustified tariffs that are imposed by the Americans. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, Canadians chose this government, because there is a lot that we can do and that we can control. For example, we're investing in one Canadian economy. That's going to increase our GDP. There's also major projects like the TGV between Quebec City and Toronto, increasing our ports, diversifying markets. That's what we're doing to support Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent, Ackyawenrek. That's all well and good, Mr. Speaker, but it's just not working. 1 out of 3 families is struggling to pay their mortgages every month. That's the truth. Under this Liberal government, 2.2 million people every month turn to food banks. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker. That's the reality. This economist of a Prime Minister, that's 112,000 jobs lost. All countries the world over are dealing with economic crises and Mr. Trump's threats. Why is Canada the only G7 country to be in a recession?
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
The Honourable Minister, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, the Canadian economy is highly integrated with the American economy. What I'm noting is over the last year, following this government's actions and those of Canadians, we've increased our exports outside of the U.S. by close to 40%. That's a major turnaround. Why? We're signing agreements. We're signing trade agreements, critical mineral agreements, security agreements, and that's exactly what Canadians expect, and that's exactly what we're doing. The Honourable Member for Côte-du-Sud, Rivière-du-Loup, Kataskamik-Témiscouata. Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. This is not just a graph. You have to look at parents having to open an empty fridge when the kids are asking what kind of food will be on the table. Our food banks are no longer have food to provide. If this were a global crisis like the Liberal Prime Minister seems to claim it is, why is it that our communities are facing these issues and not other G7 countries? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Nature. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It just doesn't work. You know, we're hearing this on a daily basis. They're saying it's not working. In La Presse a few weeks ago, the journalist Maria Fournier was referring to a research study that's saying it is working. In fact, the groceries and essentials benefit is working. The food banks are saying it's working. We're helping Canadians on a daily basis. We're creating jobs on a daily basis. And in my colleagues' riding, we're drawing in investments. It is working. It isn't because they keep saying that it isn't working that Canadians aren't on board with us.
Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, known worldwide for their talent and creativity, Canada's cultural industries support hundreds of thousands of jobs nationally and drive economic growth. In 2023, China was Canada's fourth largest creative export market. During the Prime Minister's visit to Beijing in January, Canada and China committed to advance further opportunities for cultural exchanges and partnerships. Can the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture and for Official Languages please update the House about his recent trip to China?
Honourable Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, last week I was in Shanghai and Beijing to speak with my counterpart, the Minister of Culture and Tourism, notably to discuss the importance of our creative industries and our cultural exports. Together, we agreed to increase our exchanges of cultural exports, specifically in the creative industries, and that's why I'll be following up that in the fall with a proper trade mission focusing specifically on those important drivers of economic growth, our cultural industry, as well as the creative industry. This is really important, Mr. Speaker, as we diversify our economy. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is now the only G7 country in a recession. The Prime Minister has spent the last year creating new bureaucracies, racking up debt, refusing to repeal job-killing regulations, Mr. Speaker. Food insecurity is up, job losses are up, income insecurity is up, insolvencies are up, and housing remains unaffordable. The rest of the world faces the same outside factors that this government is blaming for its failures, so why is Canada the only G7 country in a recession?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it'd be a good question to ask some of the CEOs of these companies that are making massive investments in Canada, like Kraft Heinz, $250 million in Montreal, Bayer investing $45 million in canola research in Winnipeg. A couple of weeks ago, I was at K&S Potash in Saskatchewan, $3 billion over 10 years, Mr. Speaker. Cargill, Saskatchewan, $350 million in a new crushing plant, Mr. Speaker. Imperial Oil in Strathcona, investing in biofuels. Mr. Speaker, are all these CEOs of these major international national companies making a major mistake, or do they actually believe in Canadians like we do?
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
We believe in Canadians. They can talk to CEOs. We're talking to Canadians. This Canada-only recession means that there are 3 unemployed Canadians for every vacant job. It means that taxes, food, housing, and other essentials now account for more than 100% of an average family's income. Will this Liberal government admit today that its long-term, ongoing failure to build up Canada's economic resilience has driven Canada into the only G7 recession, and apologize and implement the Conservative plan to unlock our resource wealth and make life affordable?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, our government has delivered real affordability measures, including cutting the gas excise tax, Mr. Speaker, all while ensuring that we're reducing our projected deficit by more than $11 billion. Our trade agreements have opened up preferential access to 1.5 billion consumers across 16 trade agreements, 51 countries, and roughly 2/3 of global GDP. Mr. Speaker, those are the facts. Maybe the opposition could recognize truth when they see it.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
Canada is the only country in the G7 in a recession. After 2 straight quarters of economic decline, the consequences are everywhere. 1 in 4 Canadians is food insecure. Millions of people are struggling to put food on the table. Canadians are cutting back and lining up at food banks, yet reports of the Prime Minister's lavish catering and elite events continue to pile up. The Prime Minister spent more money on airplane food for 3 flights than the average family would spend on food for an entire decade. How can the Prime Minister justify spending so lavishly while Canadian families are struggling to afford the basics?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the member from Cold Lake rose to ask the question. It's important for her to remind her constituents that we're investing between $3 and $4 billion in her riding. We're making massive investments in the base there. She knows so. Mr. Speaker, we also announced a very progressive move to procure the Global Eye plane with Saab last week. 3,000 new jobs in Canadian aerospace and defence. 22,000 jobs in Canadian multi-mission aircraft. Mr. Speaker, the list goes on and on. I know they don't want to hear it. They're too busy running down this beautiful country.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray Cold Lake.
The truth is the Prime Minister continues to spend lavishly while Canadians struggle to put food on the table. After more than a decade of Liberal inflationary spending, Canadians are being stuck with the bill while government racks up debt and pays for luxury perks. Food Banks Canada's newest poverty report card warns that too many Canadians have incomes not meeting the cost of living, and having a job is no longer a reliable path to stability. Let that sink in. Working Canadians now make up 1 in 5 food bank clients. The Prime Minister says this recession is a result of global economic crisis and tariff problems. If that's true, why is there no other country in the...
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's first European LNG agreement, more than $30 billion in investment secured, Mr. Speaker. The Nouveau Monde graphite mine project in Quebec, over 1,000 new jobs, shovels in the ground. The new Darlington nuclear project, Mr. Speaker, 18,000 construction jobs. The Contrecoeur port expansion, shovels in the ground. 150 Airbus A220s, the largest order of Canadian-built aircraft in Canadian history. As the Conservatives know, Canada is facing a trade war, Mr. Speaker. We have a plan. We are building.
Honourable Member for York Centre.
The Prime Minister promised the fastest growing economy in the G7. Instead, Canada is the only G7 country in recession. That's right. Not a technical recession, a full-blown recession with 2 consecutive quarters of contraction. Since this Prime Minister took office, 3 out of 4 quarters in contraction. While 2.2 million Canadians are at the food bank, this Prime Minister spends almost $200,000 on 3 in-flights catering. 200,000 could feed 10 Canadian families for a whole year. So will the Prime Minister own his economic failure, get a trade deal, build a pipeline, and stop spending like a Liberal?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our Prime Minister has been clear it's time to invest to build Canada strong. And I will point out that in that member's riding, that includes the Black Creek Sanitary Sewer, which will expand wastewater servicing capacity to the Black Creek watershed. This is just one of the many projects that we have underway to build Canada strong. We are investing in infrastructure, we are investing in housing, and we are making these important investments in communities across Ontario so that we can create jobs and economic prosperity for all Canadians.
For York Centre.
Lights are out on the north side of the House. No more excuses. Canada is the only G7 country in recession. So where's the fastest growing economy? Instead, we have the highest household debt in the G7, second highest unemployment, insolvencies at the highest level since 2009, and all these metrics got worse under this Prime Minister. But he continues to choke Canadian energy with his net zero fantasy. So will the Prime Minister take our advice, repeal his anti-pipeline laws, axe the industrial carbon tax, and bring back Canada's economy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In every corner of this country, from coast to coast to coast, we are seeing work on incredible projects that strengthen our economy while creating good jobs. The expansion of the Port of Montreal, the Darlington Nuclear Facility, the Mercy River Wind Farm Project in Nova Scotia, the Scarborough Subway Extension, the Hamilton LRT, the upgrade of the Cambie Street Bridge in Vancouver. We are investing in Canada to build Canada strong.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only country in the G7 in a recession. Imagine hiring someone for a job that in the interview said that they would give the fastest growing economy in the G7, but they actually delivered the only economy in the G7 into a recession. It's the exact opposite result to the promise. What would be the consequence? I think accountability would be a good start. Instead of taking accountability, though, they're blaming the tariffs. If this were true, then why is Canada the only country in the G7 all facing tariffs, the only one in a recession?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is important to remind everyone, yes, that we are in a trade war with the United States. This does present unique challenges for our economy, which is why this government has taken action to help Canadians with affordability. Notably, on Friday, 12 million Canadians will receive the Groceries and Essentials benefit. This is a $950 benefit for a single Canadian, over $1,200 if you're a couple, and upwards of $1,800 for a vulnerable family of 4. This will make a real difference for Canadians, and we're proud to support these commitments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
If these measures actually did anything for affordability, we wouldn't have the lineups in the food banks that we're seeing. This exact program is going to reach less than half of Canadians out there working jobs. I'm going to repeat the question. France facing tariffs, Germany facing tariffs, Italy facing tariffs, Japan facing tariffs. Why is Canada the only country in the G7 with our economy in a recession?
Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are working hard, and this government is working hard for Canadians. We have taken real action on affordability. This includes making the National School Food Program permanent, which represents savings of up to $800 for a family with children in school. We've made investments in childcare, in dental care, and continue to invest in the Canada Child Benefit. We are there to support Canadians as they face affordability challenges and as we face this tariff war with the United States. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Richmond Hill South.
Canada is now the only G7 country in a homegrown, made-by-Liberal recession. This must be the new world order the Liberal Prime Minister keeps bragging about. 2 back-to-back quarters of negative growth and 3 contractions in the last 4 quarters. Food bank use has exploded nationwide and has doubled in just 7 years. 1 in 10 in the GTA now relies on food banks with a record 4.1 million visits just last year, more than quadrupling since 2019. And lower-income families spend over 100% of their income on essentials. If this recession is really caused by tariffs and global energy problems, then why is no other G7 country in a recession?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Instead of cherry-picking data, maybe that member should listen to the Bank of Canada governor who said, let's look at key indicators. Best net debt to GDP in the G7. Second fastest growing economy in the G7. Strongest fiscal position in the G7. Mr. Speaker, the list goes on and on. On this side, we're going to focus on building a strong economy. On that side, they continue with the rhetoric. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Nunavut.
to you, last month a group of us met Joe, a long-haul truck driver in Kavili-Hiktuk, also known as Hope Bay. We learned that he and his family have been stewards of the land for generations. Inuit in the area continue to manage the area. They have determined and will continue to help govern decisions regarding economic potential. The recent announcement of a new Inuit-led wind project at the Hope Bay mine shows what can be achieved through partnerships with Inuit organizations. Would the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources share how our government...
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member from Nunavut for her important advocacy in the riding, and they should start to listen to her a little bit more.
Yes, that's right, and treat her with some respect.
The Hope Bay project shows what we can accomplish when Inuit partners are at the table from the start. This $2 billion investment will create jobs, generate economic opportunity, and support long-term prosperity in Nunavut.
There's some commotion.
It's a very nice Donald Trump tie.
I don't know where it's coming from, but it's definitely in that corner. We're going to have to start over on this one. We're going to wait before we start from the top. We're going to wait till we're still on the answer. We're still on the answer from the Minister of Energy. Pardon? No, we haven't. So, okay, from the top, the Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, the Hope Bay project shows what we can accomplish when Inuits are at the table from the start. This $2 billion investment will create jobs. It will generate economic opportunity, and it will support long-term prosperity for Nunavut. Our government's $25 million investment in the Inuit-owned Hope Bay Wind Project will help advance and reduce diesel use and improve energy security in the Arctic. That's how we build Canada strong for all, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Brantford, Brant South, Six Nations.
Mr. Speaker, the ugly face of Liberal weak on crime policy rears its head again. This time, a Toronto carjacker stole $1 million Ferrari at knife point. But thanks to Liberal laws, he will serve the sentence in the comfort of his own home. This is the legacy of 11 years of Liberal weak on crime laws. This Prime Minister claims to be tough on crime, but Bill C-16 undermines mandatory minimums with a get-out-of-jail-free card. When will these Liberals get serious, take the crime crisis head on, and ensure that jail means jail for violent offenders?
Full Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, we have made more changes to the Criminal Code of Canada than any other government.
Hear, hear.
By strengthening bail provisions, lengthening sentences, Mr. Speaker, and guess what, Mr. Speaker? Auto theft is down across this country due to the efforts that we've made in resourcing law enforcement and making sure that our borders are stronger and in catching criminals. And I hope that the other place will pass the bail and sentencing bill as soon as possible. We're also reinstating minimum sentences, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary McKnight.
After 11 years of this Liberal government, violent crime is up 55%, gun crime is up 130%, and extortion is up 330%. Weak on crime Liberal laws continue releasing violent repeat offenders back onto our streets, and families across our country are paying the price. In Calgary, families are being threatened with extortion and having their homes shot at almost every week. When will this Liberal government get serious, take the crime crisis head on, and lock up repeat violent offenders and criminals?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, we have taken action and we're seeing results. Just recently, Peel Regional Police arrested over 17 individuals linked to extortion cases, Mr. Speaker.
Right, right on.
That investigation took about 8 months, Mr. Speaker. We have brought lawful access legislation forward in this House, and you know what? If the Conservatives got on board and helped us pass that legislation, that investigation could have only taken a month, and we could have decreased the amount of victims that the Conservatives are creating in this country.
The honourable member for Brampton.
Mr. Speaker, my
West.
committee is living in fear. Sadly, the Prime Minister is just another weak on crime Liberal. Every day extortion calls are coming in. Houses and businesses are being shot at. Gangs are sending letters to police bragging about having thousands of extortionists ready to commit crimes. Last week, the Liberals tried to boast that Peel police busted 17 members of an extortion ring targeting businesses in Brampton, but half were already on Liberal bail. When will this Liberal government get serious and ensure that violent repeat offenders are in jail?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, that is false. Half of those individuals are not on bail, Mr. Speaker. We have changed provisions. We've made it so that people can be easily removed from this country.
Right.
Many of those individuals are being removed, and others are being charged, and trials will be held. We've seen trials across this country in extortion cases, Mr. Speaker, and people have gotten hefty sentences. But if our bail and sentencing bill was to pass, Mr. Speaker, then the sentences will be even stiffer.
The honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby, Mallardville.
Mr. Speaker, the newly announced Mia Yaltwa Halid-Zogamhoon National Marine Conservation Area Reserve is a major step forward for marine conservation, Indigenous stewardship, and coastal communities in British Columbia. Can the Minister of Environment tell the House how this initiative will help protect our oceans while creating benefits for local and Indigenous communities?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I was able to go to Klemtu in British Columbia's beautiful Central Coast, along with the MP for Vancouver Quadra, where we established Mia Yaltwa. It is a new marine conservation area reserve, the first under our nature strategy. It was established in partnership with 6 First Nations, the province of British Columbia, along with the federal government. And it's going to be conserving the sister to the Great Bear Rainforest in the Great Bear Sea. It is larger than the island, Prince Edward Island. It is a beautiful place where we protect biodiversity, create economic opportunity, and advance recognition.
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is the only G7 country in a recession. No matter how the Liberals spin it, this is a full-blown Liberal recession. Investment is leaving, jobs are disappearing, and the economy has shrunk for 2 straight quarters. They can blame tariffs and global conflict, but every G7 country faces those pressures. In London, this comes as no surprise. London has been the canary in the coal mine. With unemployment at 9.2%, the worst in the country, Londoners saw the warning signs first. The Prime Minister can quote projections, but Londoners are living the reality. Will he stop denying this recession and reverse the Liberal policies that caused it?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, well, they continue to run down Canada. What we're doing is we're building. We're building in Quebec with Nouveau-Monde Graphite. We're building new nuclear right here in Ontario. We're building new mines in Thompson, Manitoba. We're building 4 new mines in Saskatchewan. We're building new pipelines in British Columbia and Alberta. And we're building new mines and LNG in British Columbia. Maybe they should start trying to help build this country instead of tearing it down.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Canada signed a police cooperation agreement with China behind closed doors. The RCMP reportedly revealed that Canada cannot publicly disclose details of the MOU without Beijing's approval. The Foreign Affairs Minister said she spoke frankly with the China Foreign Affairs Minister about the human rights abuses, foreign interference, and transnational repression activities last week. China has a history of weaponizing shared intelligence, such as Operation Fox Hunt. Will the minister be frank with Canadians and tell us if she asked China's permission to release the MOU, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, let me be frank with this House and with Canadians. Canada has entered into MOUs with China on combating crime in various forms since 2010. And as has historically been the case with this agreement, the advice of Canada's intelligence agencies are always followed. I had a productive exchange with China's Minister of Foreign Affairs on areas of mutual interest. I raised issues relating to transnational repression, human rights, security domestically, as I will always stand up for Canadian values.
I wish to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Jagrup Brar, Minister of Mining and Critical Minerals for the province of British Columbia.